Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something powerful today. Real life begins at 40. Now, some of you may have been conditioned to believe that life peaks in your 20s or 30s, that the energy, the opportunities, the dreams, the fun all start fading as the years stack up. But I'm here to destroy that lie. 40 is not the end. It's the ignition point. It's where you finally start living with wisdom, clarity, and unstoppable power. Think about it. In your 20s, you're figuring out who you are. In your 30s, you're building, hustling, grinding, making mistakes, carrying other people's expectations, and sometimes losing yourself in the process. But when you hit 40, something shifts. You stop asking, what do people think about me? And start asking, what do I want for me? That's freedom. That's real life. At 40, you're no longer just surviving. You're ready to thrive. You've been through storms, heartbreaks, setbacks, and disappointments, and yet here you are, stronger, smarter, sharper. You've got scars, but those scars are proof you didn't quit. You've got battle wounds, but those wounds turned into wisdom. And that wisdom is the currency that will make the next 40 years the most extraordinary of your life. Now, listen closely. Too many people let fear hijack their 40s. They buy into the myth that it's too late. Too late to change careers. Too late to get in shape. Too late to build wealth. Too late to fall in love. Too late to reinvent. That's garbage. At 40, you are just getting started. Do you know why? Because you're not entering life blind anymore. You're stepping in with eyes wide open. You know what works and you know what doesn't. You've tested, failed, succeeded, lost, and gained. You have leverage now. Real life begins at 40 because you finally understand that time is priceless. You stop wasting it on drama, fake friends, shallow pursuits, and chasing other people's approval. You start investing it in what matters: health, family, legacy, love, impact, and growth. I want you to feel this right now. You are not running out of time. You are entering your prime. Some of the greatest leaders, innovators, athletes, creators, and visionaries didn't just make it before 40. They exploded after 40. Why? Because they carried wisdom into their next chapter and leveraged it like fuel. At 40, you stop being reactive and start being intentional. You stop being pulled by circumstances and start designing your destiny. You don't play defense anymore. You go on offense. And when you do that, life doesn't shrink, it expands. So hear me now. This is not your decline. This is your rebirth. This is not the second half. It's the best half. Real life begins at 40 because now you have the clarity to live unapologetically, the strength to handle anything, and the wisdom to create everything you've always wanted. It's not too late. It's never too late. Your story is just heating up. Your masterpiece is still being painted. Your greatest chapter is about to be written. Stand tall, breathe deep, and say it with me. Real life begins at 40. 40 is not the end. It's the ignition point. When people talk about life, they often describe it like a mountain. They say the 20s are climbing, the 30s are reaching the peak, and the 40s are when you start to descend. That's the story society tries to feed you, but it's wrong. At 40, you're not going downhill. You're finally fueling up for the journey you were actually meant to take. The ignition point means this is where you turn the key, press the accelerator, and decide that everything that came before was preparation for what you're truly capable of now. Your 20s were about learning, experimenting, stumbling, and discovering. Your 30s were about building, hustling, sometimes burning out, sometimes winning, and often losing. But at 40, you're not guessing anymore. You've been tested. You've been refined by fire. You've been through battles that left you stronger, wiser, more focused. That's why life doesn't fade at 40. It ignites. When you look at great stories of transformation, most of them don't peak early. Most people you admire hit their stride later because the early years are never the full picture. They're just the training ground. The 40s are when you've already seen the game enough times to understand the rules, but you're still strong enough to play at the highest level. You've built resilience through failures, you've sharpened your instincts through mistakes, and you've proven to yourself that no matter how many times you got knocked down, you got back up. That grit is fuel. That wisdom is fuel. That hunger is fuel. And when those things combine at 40, they create ignition. Think about how differently you see the world at 40 compared to 20. Back then, you were still trying to impress people, still trying to prove your worth, still doubting yourself every time you hit resistance. But now you understand that resistance is a gift. You've learned that pain as a teacher. You've discovered that rejection is often redirection. And with that awareness, you're not moving blindly anymore. Every step you take now has intention behind it. Every choice you make now has weight and meaning. That is why 40 is not decline, it's ignition. You're not running on fumes of youth. You're running on the power of clarity, direction, and purpose. At 40, You finally understand the value of time. You don't waste it on things that drain you anymore. You stop chasing relationships that go nowhere. You stop investing energy into proving yourself to people who don't care. You stop getting distracted by every shiny object and start focusing on what matters. That clarity is the match that lights the fire. Because when you combine clarity with experience, you no longer live in reaction. You live in creation. That shift turns 40 from a supposed finish line into the ultimate starting line. Some people look at 40 and feel fear as if the best years are behind them. That fear is only a symptom of the stories they've been told. If you believe life is downhill after 40, then you'll live that script. But if you choose to believe that life ignites at 40, you'll see every day as opportunity, not limitation. Belief is gasoline for your fire. When you shift your belief, you shift your energy. And when you shift your energy, you shift your entire life. That's why ignition happens here. You have the power to light up the rest of your journey like never before. Consider how much stronger you are mentally now than you were in your younger years. At 20, a setback felt like the end of the world. At 30, a failure could take months or years to recover from. But at 40, you don't just recover. You rebound faster, smarter, tougher. You carry resilience that was built in the trenches. That resilience is firewood. Every lesson, every heartbreak, every disappointment has stacked up, and now it's all fuel. Fuel that was waiting for the moment when you were finally ready to ignite it. And that moment is now. 40 is not the end. It's the ignition point, because now you're not operating on hope alone. You're operating with wisdom, with knowledge, with perspective. You're not trying to figure out who you are anymore. You know who you are. You've seen enough of life to stop being naive, but still have enough years ahead to play bold, take risks, and chase what you were meant to do. That balance of wisdom and possibility is what makes 40 the most powerful turning point in your life. You're no longer running the race blindfolded. You're running with open eyes, full heart, and unstoppable drive. Ignition means acceleration. At 40, you're not slowing down, you're speeding up. You're stepping into your prime. The body may age, but the spirit is limitless. The opportunities around you are not shrinking, they're expanding, because now you can see them clearly. You've built networks, you've built skills, you've built credibility, and all of those things are fuel waiting to be lit. This is the age where people stop waiting for permission and finally give themselves permission. And when you do that, your life takes off in ways you couldn't have imagined before. So when I say 40 is not the end, it's the ignition point. I'm saying it's the moment you stop running on the training miles and finally run the marathon you were built for. It's the moment you stop trying to prove yourself and start expressing yourself. It's the moment you stop being held back by the weight of your past and start being pulled forward by the vision of your future. This is when the fire inside burns hotter than ever, when the passion you thought was fading comes roaring back, when the possibilities that seemed impossible suddenly feel within reach. 40 is not decline. 40 is ignition. 40 is where the real fire starts to blaze. You stop living for others and start living for yourself. For most of your life, you've been pulled in 1,000 directions by the voices of parents, teachers, bosses, peers, society, culture, and expectations. You've been told who you should be, how you should act, what success should look like, and what path is acceptable. And for years, you probably played along, bending, conforming, shaping yourself into molds that never really fit because you were searching for approval, validation, and belonging. But when you reach 40, something changes deep inside. You wake up one day and realize that no matter how hard you tried to please others, it never filled the emptiness. You realize that living for the applause of the crowd left you feeling hollow when the crowd disappeared. You realize that chasing other people's definitions of happiness only pulled you further from your own. And in that moment of awakening, you stop. You stop giving your power away. You stop saying yes when you want to say no. You stop betraying yourself just to keep the peace. That's when life begins. Living for others feels like carrying a backpack filled with rocks. Every rock is someone's opinion, someone's judgment, someone's expectation. You carry it because you think you have to, but over time the weight breaks you down. At 40, you finally decide to take that backpack off. You realize you're allowed to set it down, to stand tall without it, to walk lighter and freer. That freedom comes from choosing to live for yourself, not in a selfish way, but in an authentic way. Because when you honor your truth, when you align with your values, when you pursue your passions, you become more powerful, more magnetic, more impactful than you ever were when you were just trying to keep everyone else happy. Think about the years you spent seeking approval. Maybe you worked in a career you didn't love because it looked good on paper. Maybe you stayed in relationships that drained you because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. Maybe you lived quietly, holding back your voice because you were afraid of criticism. But at 40, you reach a turning point. You realize that approval is fleeting, but authenticity is forever. You realize that the people who truly matter will respect you more when you're real, even if it means some will walk away. You realize that every time you silenced your own desires, you shrank a little, and you refuse to shrink anymore. That refusal is power. That refusal is the moment you reclaim your life. A living for yourself does not mean neglecting others. It means leading from a place of fullness instead of emptiness. When you stop living for others, you stop running yourself dry, and you start filling yourself up with what gives you energy, what excites you, what makes you come alive. From that place of abundance, you can give more to the people you love, not less. You can be a better partner, a better parent, a better leader, a better friend, because you're not running on fumes of obligation. You're running on the fuel of authenticity. At 40, you learn that the most selfless thing you can do is to be fully yourself, because only then can you give the world the version of you that is whole, strong, and true. At 40, you stop apologizing for your dreams. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't understand. You stop dimming your light because others feel threatened by its brightness. You stop being controlled by the fear of judgment because you've already been judged and you survived it. You've already been misunderstood and it didn't destroy you. You've already been criticized and it didn't stop you. So why keep playing small to avoid it again? You realize that the world will always have opinions, but opinions don't pay your bills, don't heal your soul, don't build your legacy. You realize that the only approval that truly matters is your own. And when you give it to yourself, you unlock a freedom that cannot be touched by anyone else. This is the age when you begin to trust your own voice more than the noise around you. You begin to act from intuition, from conviction, from wisdom earned through decades of trial and error. You stop second guessing every move because now you've lived long enough to know that mistakes aren't fatal. They're lessons. You stop holding back out of fear because now you know fear is just a signal that you're about to grow. You stop hesitating because now you know that time is too precious to waste. At 40, you live with urgency, not in panic, but in purpose. You're no longer living to check boxes that someone else wrote. You're writing your own list, your own rules, your own mission. There's a shift that happens when you stop living for others. Suddenly your energy changes. You feel lighter, more powerful, more focused. You feel like the weight that held you down for decades has finally been cut loose. You realize that life is not about proving your worth to anyone. It's about expressing your worth through the way you live. You stop trying to earn love and start embodying love. You stop trying to impress people and start inspiring people. You stop trying to fit in and start standing out. That's why life at 40 is so different, because you finally allow yourself to be fully you, unapologetically, completely, authentically. The most beautiful part is that when you live for yourself, you give others permission to do the same. People watch you step into your power, and it challenges them to question why they're still hiding. People see you chase your dreams, and it awakens something inside them that says maybe they can too. You become a living example of freedom, not because you shouted about it, but because you embodied it. That embodiment is contagious. That's how you create impact without even trying, by being a walking reminder of what it looks like to stop living for others and start living for yourself. So when you reach 40, you don't see it as a limitation. You see it as liberation. Liberation from the expectations that once boxed you in. Liberation from the voices that once controlled your decisions. Liberation from the need to conform, to shrink, to hide. You realize you've been given permission to live your life your way, and you don't waste another second asking for someone else to validate it. You step boldly into your authenticity. You make decisions that honor your soul. You build a life that reflects your truth. And in doing so, you discover a level of joy, fulfillment, and peace that you never experienced when you were still trapped by the weight of other people's opinions. Scars become wisdom, and wisdom becomes your power. Every scar tells a story. Some are on your body, others are invisible, etched into your heart and mind. You didn't get to 40 without being tested, without facing trials that broke you down, without enduring disappointments that cut deep. You've carried heartbreak, failure, betrayal, rejection, and loss. And every one of those experiences left a mark. But here's the truth: those marks aren't signs of weakness. They are proof of survival. They are reminders that you walked through the fire and didn't burn to ashes. They are proof that you faced storms that could have destroyed you, but you came out standing. Scars are not signs of shame. They are evidence of your resilience. At 40, you finally see them for what they really are. You stop hiding them and you start using them. When you're younger, you often see scars as mistakes you wish you could erase. You carry regret, wishing you could go back and undo the pain, rewrite the past, or erase the memory. But with time, you begin to understand that those very scars taught you lessons you could never have learned any other way. The heartbreak that shattered you also taught you the value of love and self-respect. The failure that embarrassed you also sharpened your discipline and resilience. The betrayal that broke your trust also taught you discernment and strength. At 40, you look back and realize the pain you thought was punishment was actually preparation. Every scar you carry gave you wisdom. And that wisdom is now the most valuable resource you have. Was not something you can buy, read in a book, or copy from someone else. Wisdom comes only from living. It comes from bleeding, crying, fighting, breaking, and rebuilding. Wisdom is what you earn when you survive battles that others only talk about. And that's why at 40, you are more powerful than ever, because your scars are not wounds anymore. They are armor. You carry them into every decision, every relationship, every opportunity. You walk with a sense of clarity that only comes from lived experience. You see patterns others miss. You sense dangers before they strike. You recognize opportunities faster because you've already lived through what doesn't work. That's power, and it's a power that only comes with scars. The scars also humble you. They strip away arrogance and replace it with empathy. When you've suffered, you understand suffering in others. When you've failed, you don't mock failure. You encourage people through it. When you've been betrayed, you don't judge blindly. You recognize the humanity in people and still choose to stand strong. Wisdom makes you kinder, stronger, and more grounded. At 40, you no longer look at others and think life is easy for them. You know everyone is carrying scars, and that awareness makes you more compassionate, more patient, more connected. The scars that once made you feel alone are the same ones that now make you relatable. People trust you not because you're perfect, but because you're real, and that realness comes from scars. Your scars also give you courage. Because when you've been knocked down and gotten back up, what can possibly scare you anymore? You've already faced loss, rejection, failure, and pain. You've already been told no, already been underestimated, already been hurt. And you survived it all. That survival breeds courage. It gives you the fire to take risks that others are too afraid to take. It gives you the confidence to say, if I could survive that, I can survive anything. That mindset becomes your weapon. It frees you from the prison of fear. It allows you to step into challenges with boldness, knowing that even if you fall again, you'll rise again. That is power born from scars. At 40, you see the contrast between people who ran from pain and people who faced it. Those who ran are still fragile, still afraid, still unsure. But those who faced pain, who let it scar them, who didn't hide from the lessons, it shows in their strength. It shows in their presence. You carry yourself differently when you've endured storms and come out alive. You walk into rooms with a quiet confidence because deep down you know you've seen worse and survived worse. That quiet confidence doesn't need to shout. It speaks for itself, and people feel it. That's why scars are not something to be hidden. They are your signature, your credibility, your proof of resilience. Think about how scars change the way you make decisions. In your 20s, you might have rushed into things blindly, desperate to prove yourself, too eager to avoid missing out. But after scars, you see differently. You no longer rush, you evaluate. You no longer chase, you choose. You no longer fear missing out because you know missing out on the wrong thing is actually a blessing. Wisdom shifts you from desperation to discernment. That's what makes you powerful at 40. You're no longer making choices from insecurity. You're making choices from clarity. You're no longer seeking validation. You're living from alignment. That difference is everything. And it's born from the wisdom your scars gave you. Your scars also remind you that healing is possible. Every time you look at a scar, you're reminded that what once hurt deeply is now just a mark of growth. Pain doesn't last forever, but the lessons do. Scars teach you that time, persistence, and resilience can turn even the deepest wound into strength. That reminder gives you hope, and it gives you patience for yourself and others. At 40, you're not crushed by the weight of pain anymore, because you've seen that pain transforms. You carry proof of that transformation everywhere you go. You are walking evidence that what doesn't kill you not only makes you stronger, but makes you wiser. And when wisdom becomes your power, everything in your life shifts. You no longer measure success the way you used to. You stop obsessing over appearances, over external validation, over temporary wins. You start measuring success by peace, by alignment, by impact, by authenticity. You no longer crave shallow victories. You crave meaningful ones. You no longer want to impress the world. You want to express your truth. And all of that is possible because scars shaped you into someone who values what really matters. At 40, you don't need to pretend to be strong. You are strong because your strength has been tested and proven over and over again. So when you think of scars, don't think of pain. Think of power. Don't think of loss. Think of lessons. Don't think of shame. Think of survival, because those scars are not holding you back. They are propelling you forward. They gave you wisdom, and that wisdom is now your greatest weapon, your greatest guide, your greatest advantage. And at 40, you finally see it, you embrace it, you own it, and you walk into the next chapter of your life with power that cannot be shaken, because it was forged in the fire of everything you've already overcome at 40. Time becomes priceless, and focus becomes unshakable. When you are younger, time feels endless. You waste hours, days, sometimes even years, thinking you can always make it up later. You spend energy on drama, chasing approval, pleasing people who don't matter, pursuing distractions that add nothing to your growth. You say yes to everything. You scatter yourself thin. You chase too many things at once. But by the time you reach 40, you start to understand the true value of time. You realize it is not infinite. You see that the years pass faster than you imagined, that decades go by in the blink of an eye. And suddenly, what once felt expendable becomes sacred. Time is no longer something you casually throw away. It becomes your most treasured currency. Every moment matters. Every choice counts. Every distraction has a cost. That's why at 40, focus becomes sharper than ever. You begin to see clearly where you wasted time before. You remember the night spent worrying about opinions that no longer matter, the years invested in relationships that drained your spirit, the countless hours given to work that didn't fulfill you, and you promise yourself never to waste time like that again. You start to measure opportunities not by how impressive they look to others, but by how aligned they are with your truth. If it doesn't serve your purpose, if it doesn't build your future, if it doesn't feed your soul, you let it go. That's the power of focus born from the awareness of time. At 40, you no longer scatter yourself. You aim yourself. The beauty of reaching this point is that you stop being easily distracted. In your 20s and 30s, you could be pulled by every trend, every new idea, every shiny opportunity. You feared missing out, so you chased everything. But now you know better. You've seen that chasing everything leads to achieving nothing. You've seen that running after other people's dreams leaves you empty. You've seen that spreading yourself thin steals your energy and your peace. So instead of scattering, you concentrate. You choose fewer things, but you go deeper. You commit with intensity. You cut away the noise and narrow your vision. That's why your 40s become the decade of breakthroughs. Because when you stop being diluted, you become unstoppable. At 40, you also start to protect your time fiercely. You no longer say yes automatically. You no longer let guilt control your decisions. You no longer feel obligated to show up everywhere for everyone. You realize that every time you say yes to something meaningless, you are saying no to something meaningful. You become intentional with your commitments. You guard your energy like treasure. You design your life instead of letting it be hijacked by everyone else's demands. This shift doesn't make you selfish. It makes you powerful. Because when your time and focus align, you create impact that multiplies far beyond what you ever achieved when you were scattered. Another shift at 40 is the awareness that the future is built by what you choose to focus on today. You can no longer afford to keep postponing your dreams, to keep saying someday. You understand that someday is not on the calendar. You realize that waiting has a cost, procrastination has a price, and hesitation steals more from you than failure ever could. You become driven not by fear of missing out, but by fear of wasting what's left. That urgency is not panic, it's clarity. It's the understanding that you must act now, that the present moment is all you truly own, and that the longer you delay, the more life slips by. That's why your 40s can be the most productive years of your life, because you finally operate with urgency rooted in wisdom. Focus at 40 also means you stop being reactive. You stop letting circumstances dictate your direction. You stop bouncing from one crisis to another. Instead, you build structure, you create systems, you establish priorities, and you stick to them. You know that discipline is freedom, and you choose discipline willingly because you've lived long enough to see what happens without it. You understand that focus is not just about saying yes to the right things. It's about saying no to everything else. And that no becomes one of the most powerful tools you've ever owned. Every no sharpens your yes. Every no strengthens your vision. Every no clears space for what truly matters. And when your time and focus align, your confidence grows. You feel peace instead of pressure because you know you're living intentionally. You no longer wake up chasing someone else's dream. You wake up building your own. You no longer waste energy wondering what you should do. You already know what matters most. That clarity eliminates confusion. That focus eliminates hesitation. And that unshakable sense of direction makes you unstoppable. At 40, you understand that life is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters most. And when you live like that, Your results multiply, your energy expands, and your fulfillment deepens. The pricelessness of time also changes how you show up in relationships. You stop tolerating toxic people. You stop entertaining shallow connections. You stop giving pieces of yourself to people who don't value you. You realize that your circle influences your energy, and your energy influences your life. So you choose carefully. You invest in relationships that lift you higher, not those that pull you down. You value depth over numbers, quality over quantity. You no longer chase being liked. You choose being aligned. That is another way your focus becomes unshakable. You focus on people who matter, and you let go of those who don't. That releases freedom at 40. You also begin to notice how distractions were stealing not just your time, but your peace. You recognize how much mental space was consumed by gossip, by comparison, by social media noise, by pointless arguments, by negative energy. You see how all of it drained you, and you decide you're done with it. You start cutting the noise. You start valuing silence, reflection, and intentional living. You discover that peace is a superpower, and you protect it with everything you've got. That choice gives you energy, creativity, and focus like never before. Because when your mind is clear, your path is clear. And when your path is clear, nothing can shake you at 40. Time becomes priceless because you realize it cannot be bought back. Money can be regained. Opportunities can come again, but time is gone forever. That awareness makes you live differently. You savor moments instead of rushing through them. You prioritize experiences over possessions. You care less about impressing and more about connecting. You live with presence instead of distraction. That presence becomes your strength. And when combined with focus, it turns ordinary days into extraordinary ones, ordinary years into legacy years. You stop measuring life by how long you've lived and start measuring it by how deeply you've lived. That depth is the gift of time awareness, and that gift unlocks unshakable focus. So when you reach 40, you no longer treat time as cheap. You no longer give focus to everything that demands it. You live like every moment counts because it does. And from that place of awareness, you gain a level of clarity, purpose, and drive that you never had before. That is why at 40, time becomes priceless and focus becomes unshakable. This is not your decline. It's your rebirth. When you hit 40, society tries to whisper in your ear that you're getting older, that you should start slowing down, that the best of your days are already behind you. Those whispers are lies. The truth is, 40 is not the start of the end. It's the beginning of a new chapter where you live more awake, more aware, and more alive than ever before. Decline suggests things are fading, but rebirth means things are just beginning. At 40, you don't shrink, you expand. You don't weaken, you strengthen. You don't fade out, you ignite. This is the point in life where you step into a deeper sense of who you are, where you stop carrying dead weight, where you finally unleash the version of yourself that's been waiting beneath the surface. All along, rebirth happens because by 40, you've lived enough life to shade the illusions that once controlled you. You've realized that the things you thought mattered most in your 20s, the opinions, the status, the constant need to prove yourself, don't matter anymore. You've learned that failure didn't kill you, heartbreak didn't end you, rejection didn't destroy you. You've been through storms and you didn't just survive, you grew stronger. And that strength becomes the soil where your rebirth takes root. You stop seeing yourself as fragile and start seeing yourself as unbreakable. You stop apologizing for your truth and start standing in it. You stop chasing who you think you're supposed to be and start embodying who you really are. That shift is rebirth. When you think of decline, you think of slowing down, of losing energy, of diminishing capacity. But at 40, you realize you're just getting started. You're still capable, still strong, still creative, still powerful. But now you're operating with wisdom that makes everything more effective. You may not waste time the way you once did. You may not chase everything the way you once did, but that doesn't mean you've lost energy. It means your energy is more focused, more intentional, more impactful. Rebirth is not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming the truest version of yourself. It's about peeling back the layers of fear, doubt, and conditioning until what remains is raw, powerful authenticity. At 40, you stop living life on autopilot. You wake up. You notice more. You appreciate more. You realize how quickly years pass, and that realization shakes you awake to live differently. You're done drifting. You're ready to direct. You're done being passive. You're ready to be deliberate. You're done waiting. You're ready to create. This awakening is why 40 is rebirth. It's not about loss. It's about gain. You gain perspective. You gain clarity. You gain courage. You gain the understanding that you are not here to simply exist. You are here to fully live. And you refuse to waste another moment sleepwalking through your life. Rebirth at 40 is also about freedom. You free yourself from the weight of expectations. You free yourself from the chains of comparison. You free yourself from the stories that told you what was possible or impossible for you. You break those chains because you've already lived long enough to see that most limitations were illusions anyway. You've seen people succeed after failure. You've seen people find love after heartbreak. You've seen people rise after loss. So you stop believing in limits and you start believing in possibilities. That belief fuels your rebirth. You step into your 40s not with resignation but with liberation. This new beginning is also fueled by gratitude. At 40, you no longer take life for granted. You've seen enough loss to know how fragile life is. You've experienced enough pain to appreciate peace. You've struggled enough to appreciate progress. Gratitude becomes your lens, and that lens transforms the way you live. You no longer measure your life only by what you're chasing. You measure it by what you already have. That gratitude fills you with energy, joy, and resilience. It reminds you daily that you are alive, capable, and ready for more. That's why 40 feels like rebirth. Because you don't just live, you live fully. With awareness of how precious every moment truly is at 40, you begin to embrace reinvention. You realize you're not stuck. You're not too old. You're not out of options. You can shift careers. You can rebuild your health. You can start businesses. You can write books. You can travel. You can love again. You can become whoever you choose to become. Reinvention is rebirth in action. It's proof that your story is still being written. It's the courage to turn the page instead of clinging to chapters that no longer fit. At 40, you see that your past does not define your future. It prepares you for it. Every failure becomes wisdom. Every scar becomes strength. Every challenge becomes fuel. And with that fuel, you ignite a new version of yourself that is more aligned, more intentional, and more unstoppable than ever before. Rebirth also means falling back in love with yourself. For years, maybe you judged yourself harshly, criticized your body, doubted your abilities, compared yourself to others, and overlooked your own greatness. But at 40, you start seeing yourself differently. You see the resilience in your reflection. You see the courage in your scars. You see the beauty in your imperfections. You see the strength in your survival. And you begin to love yourself not for being flawless, but for being real. That love is the foundation of your rebirth. Because when you stop fighting yourself and start embracing yourself, you unlock a power that nothing outside of you can match. At 40, rebirth is also about contribution. You realize life is not just about what you can get. It's about what you can give. You spent years building, learning, and growing, and now you're ready to use it for something bigger than yourself. You're ready to impact others, to inspire, to teach, to mentor, to create a legacy. Rebirth is about shifting from success to significance, from accumulation to impact. It's about realizing that the greatest joy comes not from taking, but from giving, not from proving, but from serving. That realization gives your life new depth, new purpose, new fire. The reason this stage of life is a rebirth is because you finally live without illusion. You see life as it is and you choose to engage with it fully. You're no longer running from your past. You've made peace with it. You're no longer afraid of the future. You're excited for it. You're no longer trapped by the opinions of others. You're guided by your own truth. That's what makes 40 not a decline, but a rebirth. You've been torn down and built back up. You've been broken and remade. And what emerges is not weaker, but stronger, not smaller, but greater, not fading, but rising. 40 is not the end of your story. It's the moment you finally realize you hold the pen in your own hand and you're ready to write it the way it was always meant to be written